This is a 4-part video series on the Ford Model A transmission and how to make a cutaway. Howdy again, it's Mr. Pete. Welcome back to my shop, and this is part 2 of my video on the Model A Ford transmission and how to make a cutaway. So in part 1, if you haven't watched it, I disassembled a transmission that looked like this into all of the components. Everything has been cleaned, some parts even painted. But the essence of this chapter will be to decide how to cut out the case to best show the gears and how this thing works. Should I cut this side or just little windows in here? I'm really not sure how to do it, but I'm going to give it a try here, and I hope it turns out. So stick with me for these following 3 chapters. In about 1954, when I was 11 years old, my dad loaded up the family, not in the 51 Plymouth, but on the Rock Island Rocket, and we went to Chicago, a 2-hour ride. Arrived at LaSalle Street Station, long since been demolished. Took a taxi to the Museum of Science and Industry. It was just a world of wonder for you, and I think my dad was trying to stimulate me and my brother, and he certainly did. And I remember loving all of the displays where you could push the button and watch parts rotate, and there were many cutaway models there. Some of them I know were from International Harvester, which was a local company in Chicago, and I would watch those chrome-plated gears and painted parts rotate, and I was mesmerized by them, and I still am. In fact, if you've watched some of my other videos, I have about 10 probably, where I made cutaways on various things. I don't have them here to show you. I put them out on loan to a man, and they never came back, and probably never will, but if they do, and I would like to put down in the description some of the video titles if you want to go back and see some of my other cutaway videos. So, all right, enough gabbing, let's get to it. Okay, to repeat myself, in part 1, I disassembled the transmission, I cleaned all the parts, and that took a lot of time. This was really greasy and filthy, you saw it. And I even started to paint some of the castings. I may have to paint them again because they're going to get all scratched up. And I decided to use this Rust-Oleum, and it's called Hunt Club Green. It's not quite as dark as I wanted, but that's all I could find at Farm and Fleet. And I thought I'd show you before we get started here some of the wear on the gears. Probably still usable. A lot of burring here, so it's rougher than a cob. All of the bearings look pretty good. That gear doesn't look too bad. But anyway, all of the parts are in still good, usable condition. Some wear on the forks, and particularly in here. But, you know, no telling how many miles this transmission had on it. Remember, these Ford Model A's were only 40 horsepower and went about 45 or 50 miles an hour maximum, and probably would rattle your teeth at that. So there wasn't a big strain on these transmissions, and it's really quite small and compact, isn't it? You know what, I've thought an awful lot about this, and I'm still very tentative on where to cut it and how to cut it. I guess I'll use an abrasive grinding wheel on my 4-inch grinder, but I think this is the side I would like to open up in a window, and using my soapstone here, just showing you that I probably would cut it down there, and then across here. Boy, that looks pretty sloppy, and maybe all the way down to here, or something like that. Possibly come out a little farther, or maybe I should also come out all the way to the top and remove this rim part right here, and all the way out to the front. I really don't know yet, but I think also I will cut up into the tower here a little bit so that the spring is exposed and at least one of the rods. That way you can see the shift forks. So I don't want to take away the structural integrity of the whole case by cutting too much away, but yet I want the window to be large enough to see. And I know what's going to happen, since I am so tentative by nature, that I probably will open it up and then cut it again and again and again. And that's why it takes me so long sometimes to do a project or a video, because I am incredibly indecisive, if you will. So let me lay the tower aside, and then looking at it on the other side, I really would like to open up. Remember, this is the reverse gear, the reverse idler gear that is in here. And from this side, you're not going to be able to see much of that. So I think I would like to also cut a window in to this to expose that gear. And probably clear back to here and down there. I don't know, pretty hard to decide. That's going to be pretty easy. I hate to take this off because I just think this is such a beautiful casting. And think how the dead pattern makers made these patterns and the core that went into here. I'm sure they had a whole team working on it, but it would have been quite a job. And you know, they didn't have 3D printing and CAD and all that back then, so I'm sure there were many, many revisions and master patterns made, and then working patterns sent to many foundries besides the Ford foundry, because a lot of these were made overseas too. Now, I don't know if Ford shipped the parts over there or if they did some of the foundry work over there in Europe as well. But it's an interesting casting. Really looks so small compared to the assembled transmission, doesn't it? All right. I got to quit talking about it and actually do some cutting. I'm ready to commit myself. All right, my first cut will be along the chalk line that you see right there. And you know, cutting cast iron or machining or whatever you do, it's a filthy, filthy job because of the graphite. So I'm going to be doing most of this out in the grass. And my yard consultant told me that my soil is very much low on iron, so we'll give her some iron here. I know roses need iron too. Maybe I'll do it near my wife's rose bush. And how will I cut? Let's take a look at my tools. Okay, this grinder is from the Great Freight Store, and it's the second one I own. The first one was so bad that you could use it for 30 or 40 seconds and the relay would cut out, the overload. And then you'd have to push this yellow button here. And you could get through a job if it was a small job, but I gave it to Tommy. I hated it so much. So then I got another job where I needed this type, and I do have an air cutter for mufflers too, but my compressor cannot keep up with it. So I'm going to try this again, but I did try this once before a couple of years ago, and I do believe it also cut out because of the incredibly poor quality. They must have had a lot of feedback on that, but they didn't care enough to fix the problems. You know, it's a piece of junk is what it is. I have at least 8, maybe more, side grinders, 4.5 inch. And this might be usable also. It's a real thin blade that I've got on here right now. This one's about brand new. The guard might be in the way, but I'm like you. I'm very hesitant to use a tool like that without a guard. So we'll see how that works and get back to you in a few minutes. It just quit. Were you timing it? Look on your time bar there and see how long that lasted before the overload kicked. So now I will have to reset it. And of course it's unusable. Oh, wrong button, it's this one. Let's do it again. That's it. Should I just throw it right in the trash? You know where I bought it. Don't buy one of these. Okay, that's going to do the job pretty well if I only can stay at least near the line. Drum roll, if you please. Well, there's the first window. I tell you what, that DeWalt, that thing cuts like this is soft butter. Margarine, soft margarine. So, remember, this is tentative, which I've said 5 times. I know I repeat myself. You will too when you're ancient like me. This is crooked as a dog's hind leg, and probably will be ground or milled or cut again. And possibly this bottom part should be a little more down to the bottom, and I don't know about, anyway, I'm going to put a few gears in there right now to see what it looks like, and then I'll go back and I'll probably should do this first, cut a window right here. You know what, I think I'll do that right now, at least a partial window. Another drum roll please, and a lot louder than last time. Alright, it looks something like that with the reverse idler gear installed. Matter of fact, it looks exactly like that. And I would like to open up this more later, maybe to even expose part of the shaft. All the gears are assembled, and I got to admit, I'm liking it. Now the question is, put it in the comments, what gear am I in? That's irrelevant. I'll have some more quizzes like that after part 3. But you can see that this gear is hidden from this view, as the main drive gear is for that matter. So this has to come out, or at least part of it, to make them visible, doesn't it? I could go a little bit farther on the bottom here too to expose these gears. Probably not necessary, but definitely along this line here. Another, 3/4 of an inch probably will do it. But it's looking pretty good. Did you get any fish last night, Jordan?
No.
No? All right, see you in a little while after I trim some more of this out and soften the corners, make it look just a little bit better. But it's coming along nicely, isn't it? Now we got a picture window. I'm down in the basement now. I wanted to open up this hole for the reverse idler gear, and I wanted to be able to see what I'm doing. So as I start to mill this, it will just be very apparent and easy and clean cutting and all of that. So look at the setup that I made. That setup alone cost me 30 minutes out of my life, most of the time looking for fasteners, and I was able to thread regular American threads, standard threads, into the cast iron tranny of Hank's. I think I'll force a little lesson on you right now, and I'll make it real quick, and it's all about cast iron and what a miracle metal it is. And some of the characteristics are that it's relatively low in melting temperature at about 2200 degrees. It's highly fluid with great castability, excellent machinability, as you'll see in a minute if you have never actually worked with it. Great heat transfer, typically in an engine, to transfer the heat through the coolant and so on. It's very abundant in nature and relatively low in cost. The biggest disadvantage, it's incredibly brittle, as you know, and the swarf and the dust is extremely messy. Okay, Art Fern here again. Notice my setup here. Angle plate with 2 bolts holding it to the table, and then 2 bolts into the casting itself. Not quite enough, but I have to worry here about the alignment of holes and the availability of the slots and all of that. And let me show you what I did on the other end. I'm cutting with a 3/8 end mill, so there's not a lot of force on the work here, but I've got a toe clamp here into one of the big holes, and that should prevent movement and chatter. Let's get started. I won't show the whole thing. Okay, the gear fits in there like that, and remember I wanted to show part of the shaft, so I'm going to mill about halfway into this hole that holds the shaft, and you can see a line that I've drawn here, and I'm going to clean all of this up here. It's very rough and sharp because it was ground. As a matter of fact, it's kind of wicked. Well, there it is. You see it'll show part of the shaft. That's what I wanted to show. Got a deburr in there because it's still kind of wicked. Clean up, and I think the job is done. Well, you know what? This is going to turn out to be the longest chapter. I thought it would be the shortest chapter, but all of the cutting is done. I'm ready to mask it and paint it, but wait, I haven't done the tower yet. Well, I've been at this for about 8 hours and I'm pretty hot and tired. I'm going to barbecue some chicken wings, and I'm not going to show it to you either. But I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and mask this off and paint the bottom casting here off camera, temporarily assemble it, and see what I want to cut out here on the tower to show the working parts of it and the forks and everything. So I haven't decided on that yet, but I think that I came to a good decision down here as far as where I was going to cut out the main casting. So well, I'm not crazy about the color, but that's what it looks like so far. Perhaps the inside should have been painted white. Sorry, but I lost most of the footage of me cutting the main case. But on the tower here, I plan on cutting it along here, up the tower itself, and across, down, and exposing all of that area. That'll be my initial cut, and then I'll take it from there if necessary. And most of this can be done on the vertical bandsaw, but this will need to be done, I think, with the grinder. Okay, that really opens it up, doesn't it? And I think I will still now, as just mentioned, cut out this portion of the tower here, and you'll be able to see the spring is probably unnecessary. Again, I got to use the grinder for that. Let's see if that'll pop out of there. Hot. There we go. Well, I know the safety Nazis are going to crucify me for taking that guard off, but so be it. That's what I had to do to get the job done. Now, the Dremel tool, clean that up a bit and degrease it, paint it, and it's ready to reassemble in the next video. Lots of still pictures at the end of this chapter, so be sure and check them out. These are the pieces that are removed for the cutout, and it's about 2 pounds worth. Well, that concludes this rather lengthy chapter of cutting away. Again, I thought it would be a very short one, but it didn't turn out that way. So join me in part 3 or chapter 3, where I reassemble the unit and talk about the different components. See you then. This is Mr. Pete.